February 14, 1923, Milly Fremont, a world-famous evangelist, goes with two friends for a picnic lunch at Pacific Cove, which was roughly 7 miles down the coastline from Los Angeles. It was a pleasant day, until it wasn't. After lunch, her friends went to a nearby pier to buy cotton candy, and when they returned, Milly was gone. The country was in a state of shock. A desperate search began, with law enforcement and amateurs alike. And then, 31 days later, she miraculously reappeared. Where did she go? What happened? What was her explanation? This is the subject of tonight's edition of Inside Report. Join us for The Mystery of Pacific Cove. Welcome to Inside Report. And who was Milly Fremont? And why did her disappearance cause such a national uproar? Well, at the time, she was nothing less than the most famous evangelist in the world, with a megachurch in the heart of Hollywood, home to many in the motion picture industry. In North Hollywood stands the Milly Fremont Museum, where her career is celebrated in paintings, letters, pictures, posters, costumes, and any interesting thing tied to this beloved star. There is even a statue of Milly that stands in a courtyard behind the gift shop. Some saw her as a great woman of God who brought hope to a troubled world. Some saw her as a fraud, a glamorized female version of the crafty snake oil salesman. And others saw her as an angel from heaven, here to bring new revelation from the Lord. In 2018, acclaimed biographer Alfred Manford published a book on Milly Fremont called Angels They Do Fall. He said of Milly,
"She had a very loyal following. They took a poll once among her supporters, and 64% of them loved her more than they loved their own parents. And 92% trusted her more than any other preacher they had ever heard. And though she was Protestant, many Catholics began to attend her church, and when a poll was taken with them, 64% of them trusted her more than the Pope. When the Pope heard this, he joked, 'That's only because she has better legs.'"
In 2023, for the 100th anniversary, acclaimed author Mary Ann Winters wrote a book about Fremont's disappearance called The Pacific Cove Mystery. She said of Milly Fremont,
"The church was Hollywood's church. Charlie Chaplin was seen there often. A famous comic actor at the time, Ben Turpin, was one of the ushers. There was an actor named Alexander Tall, who was rather short, and Milly promised, because of her special connections with the Lord, that she could make his legs grow longer, grow them out. And Alexander said, 'You can make me taller? Where were you when I was in high school?'"
At Pacific Cove, every Valentine's Day, the Milly Fremont Historical Society gathers for a picnic lunch. For $50, you get a tuna fish sandwich, a pickle, and a bag of potato chips. The exact lunch that Milly Fremont ate that afternoon in 1923. That Valentine's Day began with perfect weather and no hint of trouble. The friends who accompanied her were Alice Chapman, a church administrator, and her boyfriend Victor Templeton, a successful businessman who gave generously to Milly's church.
As the story goes, after lunch, they told Milly about this delicious cotton candy that they sold on the pier at Red Seaweed Beach, which was just to the north, and Milly said, "I must have some."
The pier at Red Seaweed Beach still stands, as well as the Red Seaweed Shop, where you can buy what is now called Milly's Cotton Candy.
So the couple went to buy cotton candy, and when they came back about 20 minutes later, Milly was gone. So they began walking up and down the beach, and there was no sign of her. Then Templeton said she may have gone for a swim. I hate to say this, but she may have drowned. And Alice said, "Don't speak of such things. After all, we're talking about the Lord's special angel here."
The couple panicked. They called the police, and the search began. Once the word got out that America's most beloved evangelist had disappeared, it turned into the manhunt of the 20th century.
The Coast Guard patrolled up and down the coast with amateur boaters and vessels of all sizes and shapes joining in on the search. Policemen and followers searched through the streets near Pacific Cove, knocking on doors in all the neighborhoods. Los Angeles didn't want to think the worst about the fate of their beloved heroine.
For Milly Fremont, life began on February 23, 1901 in Collinwood, California, a small town roughly 100 miles south of Sacramento. Her parents were James Fremont, a jelly bean salesman with the Sugar Heaven Candy Company, and Danielle Fremont, a homemaker who brought up her children in a strict Baptist church. In 1912, Milly's Aunt Linda took her to see her first movie, a comedy called Next Stop Kalamazoo, at the La Tosca Theater in Collinwood. The star was an actress named Diana Darling, the top female comedy star of the time. Milly was hypnotized from the start. The La Tosca Theater still stands, now a specialty revival house that shows foreign language films and obscure Superman cartoons. Milly Fremont was hooked, and Diana Darling became her role model and inspiration. She was not going to settle for a ho-hum life in a small town. She was going to be in pictures.
She was completely enchanted. Diana Darling became her hero. She wanted to be just like her. She made up her mind at age 11 that she was going to be a movie star.
Her mother saw show business as a place for earthy, worldly people. She saw acting as a seedy profession. And here Milly Fremont tells her mother that she's going to be a movie star. And her mother promptly fainted. And when they revived her, she said, "You're going to think me mad, but I could have sworn I heard you say that you were going to be a movie star."
The Fremont House in Collinwood still stands, now the Milly Fremont Birthplace Museum. It is here in the parlor where Mrs. Fremont fainted that Saturday evening in 1912. And in the gift shop, you can purchase Milly Fremont coffee mugs and pillows. In 1919, at the age of 18, Milly got a job at a coffee shop and saved up enough money for a bus trip to Hollywood and a month's food and rent at a boarding house on Stanley Avenue. "I'll give myself a month to become a star," she said, "though it will probably take less."
Motion picture stardom turned out to not be as easy as it looked. She had a terrible time finding anything. And soon she was running out of money and in desperate times very disappointed, and she saw a help wanted sign in front of a diner, and she thought, well, I really have no choice.
So she was literally walking to this diner to apply for a waitress job, and then she heard all this commotion going on down the street. So she walked further down and saw this huge crowd of people. And as it turned out, this prominent director, T.L. McBride, was making a movie. The crowd was a group of extras, who in the story were supposed to be a group of supporters celebrating a governor's campaign win. The assistant director wanted more extras for the scene and saw Milly standing there on the corner, so he yelled out to her, "Hey, miss, would you like to be in pictures?"
The extras would work for the next 3 days. And on the last day, McBride needed one of the female extras to wave from a second-story window. Out of perhaps 800 women, Milly was chosen. She felt like she had arrived. T.L. McBride's next film was to be a World War I epic called The Roaring Silence, which he felt would be the magnum opus of his career. And he cast Milly as a nurse, telling her, "I don't mean to boast, but this picture will make you the biggest movie star in the world." The studio he worked for, Emerald Pictures, made films with an average budget of $60,000. The budget for The Roaring Silence was $800,000. But T.L. McBride had built up such a solid reputation that the studio head, Archibald Jace, said, "I trust my director completely. He is a genius. The Roaring Silence will be the greatest movie ever made," and pocket the studio at least $10 million.
The studio was afraid of him. They were afraid of T.O. McBride. They didn't want to upset the most powerful director in Hollywood. And McBride was just, he was so pretentious. One of those who saw himself as a brilliant director. He spent money hand over fist. A group of foxholes were dug in a line, and McBride said, "These foxholes are too close together. I want them separated by 2 more feet." So they had to refill the old foxholes and dig new ones. That's the kind of director we're talking about here.
The film ended up costing $2 million. The fate of Emerald Pictures was literally riding on this one movie. And McBride held the first screening for the head of the studio at the screening room on Gower Street.
Emerald Pictures is long gone, but the Gower Street screening room still stands, the building where The Roaring Silence held its first showing. It led to a blow-up that has been passed down in Hollywood through the ages.
The studio head discovered that the movie was 5 hours and 24 minutes long. They said after the screening ended, he looked as white as a ghost, looking straight ahead and not blinking.
The studio head was furious and famously said, "No picture should be 5 hours and 24 minutes long, especially this one."
When The Roaring Silence opened on May 1st, 1921, the critics tore it to shreds, calling it an atrocity so bad it almost makes the real war look pleasant. At the Ridgemont Theater in New York, the film was yanked from the screen 45 minutes into its first showing, and the manager showed cartoons instead. After the failure of the movie, it appeared that Milly Fremont's career in motion pictures was over. The movie that was supposed to make her a star turned out to be nothing less than the biggest disaster of the silent era. But as she was walking down Hollywood Boulevard one morning in the spring of 1921, she saw a poster for a revival meeting being held at an auditorium in downtown Los Angeles called the Starburst. The star was a traveling evangelist from Polomia named Palo, sometimes called the Great Papa, or Palo the Great. Palo was born in Athena, Polomia on October 31st, 1896. At the age of 21, he was told by a prophet that he was to be an evangelist who would bring God to the nations. He began to travel the world, preaching his kind of gospel, that God wanted everybody to be rich and happy all the time, but it only works if you donate your money to him. He arrived at revival meetings in a horse-drawn carriage with a full police escort. He wore black capes and flowing robes, made outrageous claims that God spoke only to him, and demanded that in every venue he spoke in, the podium be stocked with a bowl of lightly salted potato chips and a flask of homemade gin. The Starburst Auditorium still stands, and it is here where Milly Fremont's life took a dramatic left turn.
So Milly attended this revival meeting and was impressed with Palo the Great from the start. Her parents' Bible-believing Christianity seemed so bland in comparison. She caught his eye in the crowd, and he invited her to come up on the stage.
He told her that he had a message for her from the Lord. You know, the Lord saith, "You, my dear, are to be a light unto this world. You are to be a preacher, a teacher, and a prophet. The Lord will bless you richly, as long as you put all your trust and hope in Palo the Great." Then he placed this shawl around her neck to symbolize her new life.
At the Milly Fremont Museum, the shawl that Palo the Great placed around Milly's neck that night at the Starburst Auditorium is on full display. It would begin one of the most well-known and most lucrative partnerships in the history of Western world religion. Palo took her under his wing and showed her the tricks of the trade, mainly from his own personal guidebook, which was called Fleecing the Flock and Having a Good Time Doing It. He told her to always preach what the people wanted to hear, plant actors in the crowd to be used for fake miracle healings and prophecies, and convince the people that their only hope in life is to invest in your ministry. When he left Los Angeles, he took Milly on the road with him, and when he had her speak to the crowds, discovered she had a star power they found charismatic and fascinating. He would feature her prominently on the posters, feed the press colorful stories about her performing miraculous healings, and paid people to write letters to newspapers, claiming they were healed of serious diseases. Palo and Milly decided to form their own church in Hollywood, buying an old storage building and turning it into the brightest light of the world church. Milly had wanted to call it the Light of the World Church, but Palo told her, "My dear, our church will easily be the most important church in the world. Let's stick the word brightest in our church name, for there is no one more precious to God than us." The former church building still stands, though it is now the headquarters for a pesticide company. But in 1921, it was the biggest church west of the Hudson River.
Her services weren't really church services. They were more like shows. Milly Fremont would appear to a standing ovation and then preach about how God was going to fix their every financial and health problem.
She would sing, she would dance, she would read poetry, but most important of all, she would preach that God was going to make their lives absolutely wonderful, as long as they gave generously to the church.
Milly Fremont went to Hollywood to find fame and fortune, but discovered it would not come from movies. It would come from something she thought even better: religion. She was the star she had dreamed of becoming. People wanted her autograph, and money was rolling in. She had no idea of the dramatic events that lay ahead of her.